Congress actually slashed the limp budget back in December, but still allocated $10 million of your tax dollars to it. You can see why critics call it a zombie program. Ever since then, states have consistently notched up how fast people can go on the highway. The blacklisted police departments on this list that we called, that actually called us back, all told us the same thing. Today, your favorite auto mechanic is probably using a computer like this to figure out what's going on with your car. It's unclear what sort of influence, if any, the trip might have had back here in Washington in the halls of power. But it also has a number of tools in the toolkit to track exactly who is using those gas cards.
Senator Warren?
No. Senate Democrats plan to vote against Betsy DeVos's nomination this week, saying she's unqualified to lead the Education Department.
Mrs. DeVos.
They've questioned whether she'd even be considered for the job if not for her family's history of donating to Republicans.
Do you think if you were not a multi-billionaire, if your family has not made hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions to the Republican Party, that you would be sitting here today?
Senator, as a matter of fact, I do think that there would be that possibility.
We went through FEC filings and found hundreds of donations to Republican senators. Many of those senators will soon be voting on DeVos. This is a DeVos family tree. Much of the money comes from Betsy DeVos, but we also found donations from 10 of her extended family members. We checked campaign filings and found the DeVos family donated $25,000 to Ohio Senator Rob Portman. A Portman spokeswoman told us the senator supports DeVos because she demonstrated a commitment to public education and because of her support for local control of schools. All Republicans we talked to said the donations had no impact on their support for DeVos.
Betsy DeVos has spent years of her life, millions and millions of her dollars, and a tremendous amount of energy and effort to try to make sure that poor kids get the same kind of educational opportunities that rich kids have.
Other Republican aides told us Democrats should look at their own campaign contributions from teacher unions opposing DeVos. Our review shows unions gave almost $5 million to candidates last year. 94% of the money went to Democrats.
This is the most coveted piece of real estate in Washington, D.C.
It's real estate owned by all of us. The new Trump Hotel is at the historic old post office building. The president-elect leases it from the federal government. That may be a problem. We pulled up the lease. It says, in part, no elected official of the government of the United States shall benefit from the lease. A contract expert told us, as president, Donald Trump would benefit from the hotel even if he leaves his business. Lawmakers on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee are the ones that oversee these kinds of leases in Congress. Whether they're concerned about the Trump Hotel really depends on their party. Democrats on the committee call it a clear conflict.
It's a real concern. This is not something that's just a payback by Democrats. This is something he needs to address.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple quick questions. Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz is chairman of the House Oversight Committee. Like other Republicans we heard from, he said it's too soon to raise concern.
When he becomes the president, we'll start providing some oversight of that.
And how aggressive will this committee be overseeing potential conflicts of interest with President Trump?
Oh, look, his obligation is to abide by the law. Our obligation is not to be a cheerleader for the president, but to actually provide oversight.
Trump says he will leave his business entirely, but 3 of his children also are on the lease. Daughter Ivanka signed it. Oversight Democrats gave the government leaseholders a week to answer what steps are being taken to protect the interests of the taxpayers.
All of a sudden it felt like something hit, and then I seen the plane, we seen fire.
A U.S. Air 737 landing in Los Angeles slams into a commuter jet waiting to take off.
A huge ball of fire rolled up on the left side of the plane.
35 dead. This was the ultimate example of a runway incursion. Planes on the ground coming too close to other planes or airport vehicles. These parking areas at airports that we're so used to seeing aren't really what the FAA is concerned about. It's more like taxiways and certainly runways where these incursions can become a problem. Runway incursions are increasing, not in Dayton, but across the country. 328 this time 2 years ago, 359 last year, to an all-time high last quarter of 389 runway mistakes.
The potential for a mishap or an accident because of a runway incursion is there.
We built a database using runway incursion information from the FAA and found 25 runway errors in Dayton since 2002. Dayton recorded 6 incursions in 2013 alone, but just 1 event last year. No runway mistakes so far in 2015, a break from the increase seen nationally. The FAA has noticed the national uptick in incidents too, now considering better tarmac signage and lights, electronic voice alerts linked to GPS to warn of danger, and a heads-up pilot to scan the ground for threats.
It's a multi-layered problem because it's not just pilots. It's also ground vehicles and air traffic controllers.
It's been 5 years since anyone has died in the kind of runway mishap seen in L.A., a safety record now threatened by growing reports of close calls.
As News Center 7's Patrick Terpstra reports, a foreign government secretly paid for the trip.
32 House staffers joined members of Congress on a trip to Azerbaijan in 2013. The conference was billed as a celebration of partnership between the U.S. and the former Soviet state. The House Ethics Committee approved the jaunt at the time. Later, it discovered Azerbaijan's state oil company paid for the trip, a violation of ethics rules banning foreign governments from funding travel. The committee placed no blame on lawmakers, saying they were deceived.
This trip to Azerbaijan very clearly was an effort by the government of Azerbaijan and by the oil companies that were involved in this to gain the ear of members of Congress.
The Ethics Committee recently named names of lawmakers on the trip, but not staffers.
Staff is important because staff does so much of the work.
We identified staff on the trip by combing a public database of congressional travel filings. Dayton Congressman Mike Turner sent his legislative director on the trip. Congressman Bob Gibbs sent 2 aides, his chief of staff and his legislative director. It's unclear what sort of influence, if any, the trip might have had back here in Washington in the halls of power. Both lawmakers and their staffers told us they didn't feel like they were getting any sort of hard policy push while they were in Azerbaijan. Gibbs' spokesman responded by saying any trip sponsor who broke the law should be prosecuted. Turner's spokeswoman declined to answer our questions about the trip. Now Congress watchdogs want reforms to require better vetting of travel sponsors.
The only people that are accountable to the voters are the members themselves. So saying that some other body gave them approval in the end is really not good enough.